So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today to the Taleo for infrequent users briefing. First of all, I'd just like to thank Naomi, the acting section head of recruitment, who's here with us today, because later on there might be some questions about policies, about different rosters and so on, and Naomi was kind enough to block that in her calendar and come along. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Alaf. I've been working in the agency for approximately 20 years. I started in TC, was an admin assistant in safeguards. Before that, I was working with Naomi in the recruitment team. And most recently, I joined Bob and his team on a mobility as an associate training officer for the APES team. So I see many new faces that I haven't met before, and I'm glad that you could all make it today. Now, just to start off, can you maybe just raise your hands, and don't worry, it won't pick on you, if you've never used Taleo before or only sometimes use it? You are all in the wrong briefing here. It's next door. No, you're actually in the right briefing. And I'm happy to see so many hands, because today what we're going to do is really give you a brief overview of Taleo, what Taleo is exactly, and how do we use Taleo and what we use it for. And I'm also happy to have Mukul here, who's working with the APES team. He's our Taleo expert, so he can also give us some live demonstrations later. Let me just go briefly into the agenda today. We're going to talk about what Taleo is. Some people have never heard of Taleo. We're going to talk about requisitions. You've heard this term being used a lot, Taleo requisitions. What are requisitions exactly, Taleo requisitions? We're going to talk about collaborators and what are Taleo collaborators. What's the difference between a hiring manager and a Taleo collaborator? And how do you become a collaborator? We'll go briefly into the difference between staff and non-staff recruitment, because that's essential when using Taleo as well. What we'll do then is we'll open the floor for questions. Since you guys probably have never seen the system or never used it or only used it a few times, you might have quite a lot of questions either to me, to Mukul, or to MTHR, to Naomi. And then Mukul will go into the system briefly just to show you what it looks like, where you initiate requests for consultants, where you can start a staff requisition, because it can get quite confusing sometimes, to say the least. Okay? Now, Taleo. What is Taleo? Taleo is a system that we use for the entire recruitment process. So that means from shortlisting, sourcing, where candidates apply, evaluations, offer creations, all the way onto onboarding. Onboarding is a new terminology we're using right now. We do this in Taleo as well. Onboarding is essentially when we hire someone, an international staff member, and they come to join us. They start doing the work from their system online by sending us their passport copies, by giving us their travel details. This is part of the onboarding process. This is new. We didn't used to do it like this. Staff members would come, they'd bring in all their documents, and that's how we would do the onboarding. But now it's all done in the system, in Taleo. Taleo has been used by other international organizations before, IMF, UNESCO. Obviously, the agency has started using it as of Plateau 3, Go Live, which was the beginning of the year. So we started using Taleo. Taleo is an off-the-shelf product from Oracle. Like all other APES modules, it's an Oracle product, but we've tweaked it, of course, so that it fits to our rules and regulations in the agency as well. So sometimes it can get a little confusing. Now, all hiring managers and supporting administrators, when they need to hire someone, they begin by doing a Taleo requisition. I know many of you have heard of requisitions when it comes to procurement. In Taleo, when we say requisitions, it's pretty much a vacancy notice. Think about it this way. This is the easiest way to understand what a Taleo requisition is. An entity that defines HR requirements in Taleo, which enables people to apply to a position and people to be appointed to a position. Old system, as I said, vacancy notice. Or, if you remember in the old days, we used to do these Word documents, requests for consultants. Remember, you had to fill in these paper documents, these templates. Or interns, we used to do IOMs. Or flyers for non-staff. Now this is all done in Taleo through requisitions. Different types of Taleo requisitions. There's staff requisitions, of course, fixed-term positions that you advertise. You have staff non-advertised positions, so for monthly, short-term, or TA contracts, when you just need help for a few months, you create a requisition for a TA contract. We have our non-staff, like SSAs, cost-free experts. Now, in most cases, consultants and interns, we do not advertise these positions, okay? In few cases, we do. Such, I gave you an example. Tools and strains for mosquito species consultant. I guess we don't have such a huge pool of strains and mosquito species experts in the world, so we had to advertise that. But this is very rare that we advertise a consultancy. What happens is consultants apply to a big roster, a pipeline. So get used to this terminology, pipeline requisition. This is where we advertise so that many people can apply and say, well, if you ever have a position in this area for a short-term consultancy, I'm interested. Pipeline requisitions. We do it both for staff and for non-staff. Interns apply through a pipeline, okay? And there's a roster where eligible interns are included into this pipeline. Consultants, as I just said, we have an example, talent pipeline for engineering professionals and experts. They don't apply to a specific job, they apply to a pool where they can be considered later on and be selected from that pipeline. TC experts also quite often have pipeline requisitions, and in many cases TC, because of their speciality, also advertise. But as I said, it's very seldom that we advertise a consultant position or an intern position. And staff, MTHR, recruitment unit, administer the GS roster. So once or twice a year, I'm not sure, MTHR goes out and says, whoever's interested in short-term GS positions, apply to this. And then from that, they do their testing and they're included into a general roster. What is a collaborator? Now, I can imagine many of you might one day have that role of a collaborator if you're going to be involved in a Taleo requisition. Either because you are assisting in a recruitment process on ad hoc basis. So you don't do it regularly, but once in a while, a hiring manager will say, Tawfiq, can you do me a favor? I want you to hire a consultant in MTBF who does this. That's a collaborator. You would need the role or the responsibility, and I'll go into the roles and responsibilities because it can get confusing. So someone who is not an administrator or not a hiring manager, but who will sometimes work on recruitment issues can be a collaborator. Collaborators can do pretty much everything hiring managers and admins can do, except one thing. They cannot move candidates forward in the process. And I'll explain to you the process, what I mean by moving candidates forward in the process. And one more thing that doesn't happen is they do not get notifications on candidate progression. How do I become a collaborator? That's a good question. One has to request the HCM AA level Taleo responsibility or hiring manager responsibility. Now, I told you about roles and responsibility. Roles are, an AA has a role of an admin assistant. Within that role, an AA has various responsibilities in order for that AA to do the job. Now, in your case, you probably don't have the role of a hiring manager or an AA, but you might require the responsibility to use Taleo. So that has to be requested separately. It's not part of your role, but it can be part of your role. It's an additional part of your role. So the responsibility, in order to request it, has to be done via the APES role request form in the self-service page. On the top right, you have this support page. This is where this form would be available. And of course, not everyone can just say, well, you know what, I feel like recruiting people, so I'm going to ask for the responsibility. It has to be approved by the admin officer, and there has to be a valid justification for it. You're going to be involved in recruitment from time to time. Collaborators, and keep this in mind, and Mukul will show us a bit later. When you're a collaborator, once you get into the system, you have to make sure to change a drop-down menu to say, I'm working on this because I'm a collaborator. Because it is defaulted at showing you requisitions which you own. Okay? So keep that in mind. You always have to change the drop-down menu to, I want to see requisitions which I collaborate on. So, the difference between staff and non-staff. Sounds simple, but in Taleo world, it's a little bit different. Staff positions, when we prepare our program and budget, we prepare our established positions according to our programmatic needs. We do this 2 years ahead of time, every biennium. So we have a certain amount of staffing positions that we know we're going to need. We request additional, we abolish some. All staff positions are created in Hyperion, is where we do our program and budget exercise, in Hyperion. All the positions flow into EBS. If you haven't heard EBS, it's E-Business Suite. EBS is where we work on our job descriptions later on. So we have the positions. I want a recruitment officer, a P3. I create it in Hyperion, goes into EBS, and that's where I work on the job descriptions once it's been approved. Once you have an approved job description, then it can go into Taleo for recruitment. So the JD goes into Taleo, and you can initiate recruitment, a normal staff vacancy, a requisition. Now, again, this might be a little too advanced, but just so you keep it in mind, staff positions always come into Taleo in the pending status. Why is that? Because at that stage, you're really going to define what sort of filter questions, what's profile questions you're going to ask against that staffing position, that requisition. You're going to sit with MTHR recruitment officers and you say, well, I need to hire a public information officer, so I really would like to ask these questions so that when these people apply to this position, I can really funnel them out and get the best candidates possible. And we'll talk about best candidates in a little bit. Once it's approved, once the JD is approved and all the questions have been identified, it changes from pending to open, and you can advertise it like we used to do in HR Connect. Now, again, remember I said staffing positions all start in Hyperion. All staffing positions in Hyperion have to be associated to a budget. Therefore, we link it to a PCAS, okay? Project Task Award. So we say we want that recruitment officer position, we're going to pay from the regular budget, and one of Naomi's projects, task number 2, will pay for that project at 100%. It's already got funding and has been approved by Sergey, by Janice, and the DG, and later on by the Board of Governors. Okay? Staff positions are usually advertised. So when we have a staffing position, a fixed-term position, we usually advertise it. All advertised staff positions, or in most cases, go through a GS or a P panel, meaning that it goes to all the various admin officers in the agency for recommendation for selection. GS panel and P panel. Non-staff, what's the difference? Non-staff are created not in Hyperion, but in E-Business Suite, where you actually prepare those job descriptions for your staff positions. Non-staff positions start there, in EBS. Non-staff positions, as I said in my opening remarks, are rarely advertised. Consultants, interns, we don't go every time we want a consultant and advertise it to the whole world. We usually either know who we're going to hire as a consultant because that person has worked with us before, or we'll go into that pool of candidates from the pipeline requisitions in order to get a good consultant. Candidates apply through the pipeline or through a roster, like we said, for the GS roster, for internships. They have a pipeline, and then they are linked. So we say, okay, I want to take this person and link him to that requisition because that's a perfect fit. Of course, that person still has to be interested because it may be that that person applied to a pipeline requisition 6 months ago and said, if there's ever a position available or a consultancy, short-term consultancy available in this area, I would like to be considered. Maybe they got another job in the meantime. Non-staff positions require money, okay, because they are not part of the established post that we create in Hyperion. So do we have money to hire consultants? You've heard this terminology, Taleo, of course. So for non-staff positions, you require a valid Taleo. You need to know, where am I going to pay this consultant or this intern from? From which pot of money am I going to pay them from? On top of that, of course, if you say, well, I'm going to use it from this project, obviously the allotment holder or the project manager needs to approve that. So it goes through a financial approval. Whereas staffing, that's it. There's no financial approval required. You have a P3, you can advertise a P3. It's given, it's going through the payroll. Non-staff positions are paid through a purchase order, okay? You remember we used to do it in procurement, purchasing. That's how we pay interns and consultants today. Once they come on board, we go into the system, we receipt their month's payment. They don't go through payroll, okay? ACE candidate. Remember I was telling you we try to find these excellent candidates. ACE candidates is a new feature that Taleo is really good at finding for us, okay? Remember we used to have in the old days filter questions in order to determine and to really funnel out good candidates. Now we use the terminology ACE candidate, number one candidate, okay? But this Taleo is doesn't have a brain of its own. It only works if the candidate has provided us with the proper information that we have requested. So how do we make sure that we get that information we requested? Is in order to work very hard with HR on formulating good questions when we request or when we advertise a requisition. We have to make sure we're getting the information we really need from the candidates once they're applying to a staff vacancy. Okay? Otherwise, we're going to get a huge amount of candidates, and it's going to be very difficult. Taleo will not say, well, you know, I've looked at all your personal history forms, and this one's the best. No. But according to what you put as criteria, this is an excellent candidate. This is an ACE candidate. An ACE candidate is a person who meets all the requirements you've set forth. So you've said, I need these 6. He needs to speak English, needs to have experience in budget, and must have had at least 5 years of international experience. These are musts. And I'd also would be really, really nice if this person could speak French, for example. And you put that as an asset. An ACE candidate is someone who meets all the requirements and, depending on how many assets you specify, has a certain amount of these assets. Now, again, being that probably most of you are not in the position of being a hiring manager who don't initiate requests or requisitions, you might, however, be tasked at some point of time to evaluate certain candidates for a specific requisition. Now, this is the sort, and I just gave you an example here. We blued out the name of the candidate for confidentiality reasons, but this is the sort of thing that you might get. You'll get an email saying, Dear Maria, could you kindly complete the following evaluation? It gives you the information. It's a candidate summary evaluation for staff. It tells you what the requisition is about. So, given, let's say that Maria is an expert in chemistry or an analytical chemist in Mercury, I would go to Maria and say, can you look at these 3 candidates for me, and can you complete this link? And then if you see here, there's a little link that you would press, and that would open a questionnaire, give you all the details of that person who applied to that requisition, and Maria would go in and answer, Maria would go in and answer a few questions regarding this candidate as a help. And collaborators can do that. Okay? Now, this next screen, I think, is one of the best screens the agency has come up with. I forgot, I don't know, Bob, was it Sten or who came up with this, but it's very, very good, and I'll explain to you why. This shows you the workflow for the whole recruitment process for staff. Because we have to think, okay, when someone applies, how do we get them in Taleo, EBS, all this? It doesn't make sense sometimes, it's confusing. We have various stages in the recruitment process, okay? We start with the hiring manager screen. That means anyone who applies goes straight into this hiring manager screen. So, if Naomi advertised a recruitment officer position, as soon as everyone applies, they all start coming into this hiring manager screen. Naomi's a hiring manager, so she can start looking at these personal history forms. And she starts her evaluations. She can either put them for preparation for a short list. She might hold them off a little bit and want to validate, want to check a little bit more. She can reject them. She can say, well, no, this one does not meet the minimum requirements for this position. Or the green buttons, she can move it forward to shortlist submission. Okay? And here at the bottom, it shows you who can act upon this. hiring managers, administrators, and collaborators. Collaborators can do this as well. Once they're moved from the hiring manager screen, they go to HR. Okay, I'm not going to use Naomi as an example, but Maria, if she advertised a position, they did their evaluation of candidates. They say, look, we're happy with these 7 candidates. We want to move them to HR for shortlist endorsement. Okay? So these 6 candidates go to HR and then are endorsed or not, or rejected by HR. Once they're endorsed, we can start our assessments. Sonru interviews, testing, depends on the job. And then once you've done your assessments, you have your interviews. Again, assessments are all done, hiring managers, administrators, and collaborator. Interviews as well, including HR. HR will join in the interviews. And then once you know who you're going to select, you're putting a hiring manager recommendation summary, which is sent to HR for final review. Then we get to the offer stage. It's pretty much like the old days, okay? Except we're doing all this in Taleo. We're moving candidates. Remember I told you moving candidates forward? We're moving candidates forward from stage to stage. And within those stages, there's all these steps that you have to go through. Remember I told you collaborators cannot do one thing. They cannot bypass stages. So they can't send someone from the hiring manager screen straight to interviews. Okay, they have to go through the whole processes. That's the difference. Hiring managers, let's just say, well, I know this person, I want to interview them. They can move them straight to the interview stage. Then we prepare an offer. HR prepares the offer, okay? And the onboarding starts. Like I was telling you, onboarding. We say, congratulations, Mr. X. You've been selected for the position of this. Can you please start with your onboarding process? We send them a link. They start completing, putting their birth certificates, their family's dependents, their travel documents, and then we hire them. And NTHR closes a requisition, and someone is on board, and that's how the process goes. So if you think of it in stages and steps, it makes a little bit more sense, I think. Now this is another slide, and I think Sten's prepared this one. With Bob's help, he edited it many times, I know. But this gives you an overview as well of where Taleo comes into the picture, okay? Remember I told you at the beginning, the HR plan, this is not done in Taleo, this is done in Hyperion. So we prepare our positions in Hyperion. Once we go into EBS, this is EBS, we go and we formulate the job description, and for non-staff, that's where we put the PATEO, the valid PATEO. We want to make sure there's enough money and it goes for approvals and PATEO. Then people start applying, okay? Now this already is where Taleo starts. As you see here, it's all Taleo related. People start applying, we do our assessments, our interviews, we do our selection, we do our onboarding, and in the case, of course, for non-staff, we also have to do the payments in EBS, okay? So we go back in, remember I told you, interns and consultants have a purchase order, so we have to go in and receipt them. So it's for non-staff, it finishes at 7. For the others, it finishes on onboarding and hire. Okay? So this pretty much, again, might sound confusing, but if you try to think of it in stages and steps, gives you a good overview of how recruitment is done these days. It's not so much different than the old days in HR Connect. The difference is we have mechanisms like onboarding, which we didn't have before. Something new now, consultants, less than 63 days. HR doesn't really get involved that much. We do. If we want to hire a consultant for 1 month, we don't have to go to HR and send them and do interviews, but we should do an evaluation of at least 3 good candidates. But anything less than 63 days, the departments and divisions can do themselves, given that there's enough money under that budget, under that envelope. Okay? So before we go into the live system, any questions or something that's not so clear? Please.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning.
Is there a possibility of, like old days, requesting recruitment section to do the pre-screening, or is it now up to us to do it?
I'll give the question forward to Naomi.
Rosa, well, we're actually only 8 people in the group. So pre-screening is That's basically why we introduced the filtering to aid managers to get through or to create the short lists or longer lists. As you know, we've also introduced this video software for pre-screening, which also lets the managers, I think, review a larger number of applicants than they were looking at before. So we really are basically only doing pre-screening if it's upon request, if it's a very sensitive or difficult vacancy notice that a manager is struggling with. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. We're not doing it on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. And although HR and recruitment are very understaffed and many times, just by sitting with a recruitment officer and saying, well, listen, I'm not too sure about this one. Can you help me? What do you think? Does that person meet the minimum requirements or not? They're always very helpful and friendly, the recruitment officers there. Please.
Just a question.
Can you put the mic on, because we're recording this, by the way, just so you know, for Monaco and Cyberstore.
So Sunil Gupta, I'm the Unit Head for Service Delivery. Mm-hmm. We used to have a database for interns to pick up the interns, and that's gone now. Why was that?
Okay.
Sunil, I'll tell you why. Because we are a victim of our own eagerness to start launching the talent pipelines. Now, we launched that talent pipeline for internships, and within the space of about 2 or 3 weeks, we had over 900 applications, which we do the sorting ourselves in order to create the rosters for the managers. So we're going to completely change that now. It's not going to work. It's a huge elephant out there on the website. Nobody can cope with it. And therefore, what we're going to do from now on is we're going to be advertising pipelines for specific areas where people are looking for interns. That will help you as a manager also to go through that list quickly. Because we did a check of the kind of applications we were getting. I mean, we're hoping to be attracting people for the scientific and technical areas, and they were just drowning in this ocean of applications for internships. People who did not necessarily have the kind of background that we were looking for.
So why was it easier in the previous system or the earlier system? I mean, we did not have that issue of overwhelming response.
Exactly, yeah. So I think what we really have to be doing is making it clear to candidates what we're actually looking for. It's going to make it much more a much more cohesive process between HR and the manager. So we will, and also helping the interns, potential interns, to see what we're actually looking for, not just sort of putting in a general profile, general application. So we're working together with some areas now to try to work out what that's going to look like, to be very specific. It's going to help you in the end of the day. You don't want to be having to go through 2, 3, especially in your area, hundreds and hundreds of potential applications.
Any more questions?
Can I just say something on the topic of talent pipelines? Now, this is not just some whim of HR to introduce a process that makes it more complicated for you. But if you've been reading the GC paper, the paper that we had this year at the General Conference, as part of the GC resolution on staffing, member states have made it very clear that they want to see more of a comparative or competitive process with regard to hiring of consultants and temporary assistant staff. Now, we have to report on these figures now, and therefore we have to prove that we have had a more competitive or comparative process. Now, to enable managers to be able to do that, this is why we're creating the talent pipelines. Mm-hmm. The precursor of this, of course, were the flyers, which people were putting out on the website with HR. So it is a requirement of the member states that we are able to prove that there's a more comparative process. All right, just that is clear.
Great, thank you, Naomi. Okay, so I see there's no more questions. So what we'll do right now is Mukul will go into the system and please, sorry, go ahead. Please.
So you mentioned about the ACE candidates. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably for Naomi. That is there now a thinking that we would have a roster system like we see in other UN agencies?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a very good point, Sunil. Yes, we're going to be creating rosters. I mean, we're using the talent pipelines for this purpose. And therefore, we're also trying to think of ways to make it simple for you to go through these rosters and be able to come up with, as Sam said, more than one candidate. Huh? Yeah, exactly. So we actually have somebody on board with us now, a consultant, basically to take Taleo to that next stage, to help managers and also help us in HR to be able to create these rosters. Because yes, we're under pressure from the member states to prove that we've looked at more than one consultant, but we also have to try to make that easy for you. We have to work together on this. So therefore, we have to make sure that we have viable rosters. Rosters will not be used to fill vacancy notices. They're really being used for these consultancies and temporary assistance. The DG has made it very clear he still retains that prerogative of making the decisions on all vacancies, on all appointments, or DDGMT, to whom he's delegated the authority for professional positions up to and including the P3 level. Okay? So it's not similar to other UN agencies in that case. Other UN agencies are taking, as you know, from a pool of rosters and putting people into those positions. So there will be a full competitive process for each vacancy notice. That will continue. Yeah? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Naomi. What we'll do now is we'll go into the system, and Mukul will kind of show you. In most of these cases that I see the people here, you will not start a staffing position. That will be a hiring manager or administrator or an AA. But he'll show you where that or what that page looks like, where you will initiate a staff recruitment when you have an approved job description. And then he'll show you how it links into Taleo and where you advertise a position and people start applying and you move them forward to that offer stage. And then we'll go briefly into the non-staff, so a consultant. He'll show you where do we start for a consultant. Remember I said it all starts in EBS. Show you that you have to check and make sure that the funding is there. He'll show you where that happens. And that too goes into Taleo, and you can start either linking candidates, or if it's a pipeline requisition, then people can start applying to that as well. Okay, so I hand it over to Mukul. Yeah.
So we'll start with non-staff to start with.
Or staff, yeah.
On staff requisitions, normally you would be initiating recruitment, if at all. Most likely this would again be done by your admin assistants. But we can show you the form, how you can see if the vacancy, the job description has been approved. Wait a second.
Are you hooked in? Sorry, one second, we forgot to hook it in.
No, it came out.
Excuse me, Sam, while you're waiting,
Yes, please.
Naomi or whoever, very quickly. If I remember correctly, like last year, for preparation for Taleo, the HR PPPP planning went through this extensive job description, updating, generic, and all that sort of thing. That has been now very firmly been established, and we are using the generic job descriptions for certain positions?
Yeah.
Because I was aware
that's the case.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Now, in most cases, we are trying to use generic job descriptions, but I think Naomi can add to that better. But there are some cases where we saw the generic job description is not working for everybody, so we're doing various versions of the generic job description. But the idea, I think, is to really have for all these roles a generic job description, because then all you need to do is once it's approved in EBS, you just initiate recruitment. It doesn't need to go to HRPS for approval anymore. You just can go ahead and recruit against it. But I mean, it depends on the areas. I don't know.
Basically, like admin assistance jobs, executive assistants, for instance.
These are definitely team
those
assistants.
are definitely generic, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Okay. This page normally is accessible through the AA administration page. Now, this is all your admin assistants, so they are the more frequent users. We'll show you just how the page looks like.
Should I give you that mic?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is the search page. You have two tabs here. You can switch the mode of the page from position search to position tracking. I'll just show you what happens when I click on, so this is position search right now. I would just do a blank search. You can do searches based on organization units that you have access to. This access is determined by which line of, under which department, division or section or unit you belong to. If you are under a division, you'll have access below that. If you are in a unit, you'll have access for the unit alone. Now here I have a super user kind of access. So this is a page for, and these are the positions that have already been initiated. One of the positions that we know, so one of the position that we know which was recently posted was Sam's position. This is the one. And we'll show you the job description for this one. To see the job description, you click on the pencil icon. And this is what you see. So you can see the details like the CCOG codes, how many incumbents are on the position, which org unit the position belongs to, what is the normal job description that has been selected. In this case, the job description is completely approved. And at this point, we'll only see how to initiate a vacancy, because the other parts of it, they don't really form in the purview of recruitment. Also, because you are not the admin assistants, you won't be doing this task. We come down to the very end, and we'll see that there is a recruitment, a requisition block here. This is basically to initiate recruitment in Taleo. To be able to do that, every block basically has an edit button. So you click edit here, and you define what is the contract type that you want to hire a person against. As an example, you define the duration. You say that if it is fully competitive or not. You identify the start date.
Just keep in mind, when we say fully competitive, that means it goes through a GS and a P panel.
Yeah.
Okay?
A fully competitive recruitment would be, I think, minimum the vacancy should be posted for 3 or 4 weeks, and then it has to go through a full panel approval. So you suggest to travel, and okay, in this case it would be more like this. Yeah, and you click on initiate recruitment.
And again, this is only usually done by administrators or hiring managers, so you wouldn't, as a collaborator, be doing this.
Yeah. Once you click on initiate recruitment, you should wait half an hour before it goes to Taleo. At the most, it can take half an hour. Once it's in Taleo, you'll see a status here like it says here in Taleo. If something wrong has happened, which can happen because of CCOG codes or some other information that is missing, or sometimes a technical error, you'll see the status here as error. And that's how you can monitor if the vacancy has gone in. Now this is only from the sense when the vacancy is approved and you have initiated recruitment. Now this page we were looking from a position search point of view. You might want to see that if the position that was initiated, where it is, and if you can initiate recruitment. If you go to the very top, you have a position tracking here. I'll just show you how it looks like. If you click on position tracking and you do a blank search, you will see all those positions again, but this time it shows you the status. Now here you see that which of the job descriptions are completely approved, which of the ones have not been initiated at all, and if something is awaiting approval, you'll see a yellow box here. And now to see where it is pending, you go on top of the thing and you'll see that what has actually happened to this vacancy, that at what all levels it has been approved, to the job description, not a vacancy. Now this is only the job description. Only once it is green here, you'll be able to initiate recruitment. So this was for staff recruitment. What we'll do now is we'll quickly see the non-staff vacancy initiation job description page as well. Any questions on the staff one?
Again, these can I just add, these dots are they're new as well, so you can really track where a job description is pending for approval. And once that person approves that job description, you'll see the time and date when it was approved. So it's a good tracking mechanism as well to see where something is pending.
Okay, we'll go with the non-staff now. So for non-staff, who do we all consider as to take it? So we call this form non-staff, but it's not just non-staff. It is being used for some staff recruitment also, for people who are being paid through procurement. Procurement in the sense whose salaries are not being processed to payroll. These would be daily short-term staff positions at G or P level. These would be translators who are considered as staff but are still paid based on how much work they do, how much translation they do, or monthly short-term contracts. Now, this page is basically, it will look like this, and you will see only the requisitions that you have access to. The access to these requisitions depends on if you initiated the requisition at any point in time, or if you were a hiring manager, or you were a collaborator, or an administrator. Now we have had requests from various sections of the house where we want to have this exceptional access because it's quite common, as it seems, in agency to be looking into different sections. We'll be able to answer it by the end of this month, where if the other section had approves, you'll be able to see requisitions in other sections also. Or for that sake, even if you have not initiated anything and if you are not part of a recruitment requisition, you'll be able to see them. Now, going at this is a search page like the staff one. You see all the requisitions right now. What we can do is we'll start with copying an existing requisition, and we'll go little in depth. Because this is something, if you are an infrequent user, at most we think you'll be doing this to hire a consultant for 63 days or a little more. Mm-hmm. To be able to copy, there is a duplicate icon, assuming you have something. If you're not, we'll start with a new requisition by clicking on create new requisition. I'll start by duplicating because that's easier for me from demo perspective. Yeah.
And this functionality is used quite often if you're hiring the same consultant or a different consultant, but for the same sort of work over a period of time. You could duplicate it, and it kind of pre-fills some of the areas for you, and you just fill in the dates and so on and the new funding line. So this is also very useful.
Yeah, like Sam told, all the information is basically copied from the old requisition except for the start dates. And you can basically then come in, so it is saved on top in a draft status. And basically you can come here then and update. You'll be able to change it here now. Okay, this is a requisition. So we'll just say, we'll give it, you can select the organization units that you have access to. Normally you're not able to select organization units other than where you belong. But this is, again, we are covering from the same solution that I spoke about, which would allow you to give access to different org units, would allow you to select different sections or different units depending on the approvals that you have. So it would be something like this. I'll select MTGS as an example. Because it has a TC event ID, I will let it be TC. Mm-hmm. So this is something very specific to TC, so I won't change it.
Just keep it.
The fields that we see here, one thing that Sam was mentioning, the collaborators and owners of a requisition. The owners of a requisition are the hiring managers, the recruiter, the staff administrators, and and administrators. I don't know if I spoke about it. So hiring manager, administrators, recruiters, and staff administrators. And
this, maybe on the other one also, maybe you mentioned it, but if I already know when I create the requisition as well as the job description, I'm going to take a generic one, and I write at the beginning, if I know who will be the collaborator, put it in so I do not have to ask him to be a job collaborator.
Sure, on the non-staff job description form, you can already select a collaborator. Mm-hmm. Okay, but there is a... No.
No, only once it's in Taleo and that recruitment. If it's more than one.
And if I need more, sometimes
Yes, yes.
2 or 3, then only you.
MTHR recruitment, anybody would be able to help you. Normally recruiters help you all the time. Yeah, but I also told that by end of this month we'll allow for a solution that allows you access to different org units. That would also allow you to have more collaborators. So if you know that for your section somebody in particular has to be a collaborator all the time, even though he does not form in the same section, you can identify the person if your section head approves. So this is something that you will be able to do. This is for non-staff. By the end of this month. Yeah, for the staff requisitions, staff vacancies, it can already be done. So if you want to be a collaborator on a staff requisition, even on different sections, if you send that approval, it can be done. We are doing this already for SG and specifically for CFE JPO positions, where we have some identified collaborators that are always on the requisition. Okay.
And again, for most of you, this is in depth that you won't be dealing with so much. So we'll really try to run through this as an overview more, because most of you will not be creating these. It will be an AA or a hiring manager, such as Valchild or section heads, who might be able to do that.
Sure.
Well, do you want to cover the issue that I had? It might help others if they duplicate and
yeah. So this is a very interesting issue, but I think Naomi also answered that we are moving towards a competitive process even for non-staff. But the model that we have right now in agency is more. These are these kind of needs where you already know the consultant you want to hire, or sometimes you want to extend the consultant. In this case, which is what happened. What happens when you copy? The title is copied as well. It is editable, but it is copied. And if you're not careful enough, and if it is long enough, you won't be able to see the whole text. And it gets really weird when you already say in the title of the vacancy, test requisition to hire Mukul. And then you copy, you'll have a requisition that would say test requisition to hire Mukul. You copy it again and you want to hire, let's say, Sam, and still the requisition would say test requisition to hire Mukul.
Careful in the duplication process.
But this is also something, if you're doing extensions, it is something that you might want to consider, and we'll see if we can answer it somehow. But to be careful, when you copy, you should review the organization, the name of the consultancy title, the dates, and the amounts and the grades that you want to consider, because everything is copied. In this case, you can see it's a E2, which is expert level. You can see the type of contract the person is getting, if the person would be traveling, if he is exposed to radiation and other details. So everything would be copied. I would basically quickly go down to the Taleo part, which I think would be more interesting.
Yeah.
After I have filled this mandatory field. Now, this is specifically TC again. Normally it is MTHR is the recruiters. For TC experts, you have APMs that do this role for experts in TC. So for them, you will be able to select some of them.
Or Brian or...
Yeah. I'll just fill the dates as well.
So again, this is the page where you're defining exactly what you need your consultant for, what that consultant's going to do, for how long, and where you're going to pay them from.
Yeah. One of the interesting things to note in this one is that you have two locations. You have a duty station and you have a place of assignment. Most of our short-term consultants, they are recruited at HQ, Vienna. This is where you are administering them from, but they might not work here. They might be traveling. So that's why you have place of assignment. Place of assignment is important because it goes on the offer letter as well. You give something here, it goes on the offer letter. Okay, these details like main purpose, functions and key results also form part of the offer letter. It is good that it defines what actually the person would be doing. Yeah. Organization and project settings, I would leave them empty. It does not even form part of the offer letter. It is important when you want to post a requisition. Otherwise, it's of not a significant use, and that's why it's not mandatory also. On staff requisition, it would be mandatory. You would have to include organization setting. Okay. We'll skip the competencies. We would quickly cover the Taleo part. Okay. So a consultant basically can be paid a fee. He's paid for his DSA, he's paid for travel, and he can be paid for contingency. Most of our consultants who are hired, or experts for that sake, they are going for expert missions. They are paid for travel as a to and fro ticket. They get a DSA for the time they are in the place of assignment, and then they have a fee at a daily level. Depending upon the grade that we selected on the top, it would give you a fee cap. So at the E2 level, the fee cap is 360. Nothing stops you from giving something much low. Yeah, but if I go above, it will tell you that this is above the fee cap. Now it allows you to do that, but it would mean extra approvals that include MTHR director and the DDG of the department. So you also get a message that the fee cap is broken. So this is something to consider. The quantity here at a E2 level, it determines the number of working days. How much? In case of interns, it determines in the months. For interns also, the fee cap is 1,000 per month, the stipend. The project and task, we see here pre-filled, but it is selectable for on all the other forms. For TC, it's not selectable because on an event, which is like an expert mission, they already have the identified project and task. But in this case, for everybody else, it is selectable. You go to award, you select any award, which is valid. It is basically determined if it is linked to a project and a task, you'll see them. And the expenditure types. The expenditure types are also agreed with MTBF in the sense if it is an expert or consultant recruitment, what can be the expenditure type for a fee. For a DSA, what can be an expenditure type and things like that. These change when you are hiring intern. This is to help in reporting on financial. When you do financial reporting, it would be able to identify that the money was spent against what expenditure types. Now you see I gave here 420. I'll change it back to 360 because we don't want extra approvals. I'll quickly would cover the DSA part. Now the rates for DSA are coming from Atlas. The locations that are present in Atlas and whatever DSA rates they have are the same locations present here. Similarly, so if I give a location, I'll get a fee automatically identified how much the person should get. I can further go and I can reduce it by a percentage. Yeah, if I want to reduce. Similarly, I have a travel. These are travel pairs. They are coming from Amex. So if you go to the Amex website for agency, you see city pairs there. The same amounts are available here as well. These rates are updated at the same time when they are updated in Amex. We normally do it in next 2 or 3 hours. We get the file. The amounts are updated here. Once all of this is done, and of course there is a contingency. The Pateo lines are against everyone. You can copy these lines, so new lines would be created. There is something that you can see here. It shows you the funds availability and if it has been approved or not. Right now we haven't done a funds availability check. That's why it shows as yellow. So if I come to the very end, I do calculate and check, and this is where the funds check happens. And it says, okay, the funds are available. The total funds are this much, we are using this much. So the funds are available, and this allows us basically to submit. If you wouldn't have done a funds check, as an example, if I increase it to 200, it goes yellow again because the funds have been increased. I see this one, okay, this has not approved for whatever reason. I see the submit and update button is also disabled. I cannot submit a requisition unless I have done a funds check. But important thing to know here is that it does not commit funds. You're only doing a funds check. The funds are committed only at the point in time when you initiate a purchase order, which would be after you have recruited the person, you have sent him the offer letter, he accepted the offer letter, you initiated onboarding, the person is in Taleo, and you'll start seeing him here. And once these fields are filled, you'll be able to initiate a purchase order. We do see people can try initiating it before and you'll get an error message that you can't really go ahead. So you go and you do submit. And this basically initiates approval request to your project manager. The project manager is determined by the project that is selected here. by the project that is selected here. Now you can have multiple Pateos, that would mean multiple project managers in some cases the same project manager. But for every Pateo combination, you'll have one approval request. Assuming there are two different projects and two different project managers, there would be two approval requests that would be sent. You'll be able to see the status here, that if it has been approved or not. So in this case, because nobody has approved it, you see a yellow mark here. If there are multiple project managers, you'll see all of them here, and you'll see yellow, green, depending on if they have approved. Once everybody approves, it takes about a minute or two to move it to Taleo.
Yeah, maybe we can show them how it looks in Taleo now.
Sure.
I mean, just to add one thing, what Mukul was saying, again, we prepared the job description for our consultant. We're checking that there's money under that project. It's not blocking any of the money. We have to go and find that candidate we want to recruit against this consultancy. Once we find the candidate, then we will check again the funds to make sure the money's still there, and then we initiate a PO. So this is just a check functionality for us to move forward.
Yeah. So in both the cases, we initiated recruitment, and that should enable us to see these requisitions in Taleo. Interesting thing to identify here, all the non-staff requisitions, so they have this naming convention. TAL, TCLA, or your unit. In case of MT, it would be just MT. In case of MTIT, it would be TAL-MTIT. And similarly, if it is a section in NS, it would be NSNS, NSNI, something like that. Yeah. And then you have the naming convention. In case if it is a staff requisition, you'll have the year 2015 / a sequential number. Then in brackets, you'll have the position number. And we have the sequential number because this has been a traditional way of reporting to member states. So we have kept that going forward. Okay.
Can you just show them what I was talking about? If you're a collaborator, you have to make sure that when you're searching requisitions, that you change the if you can just show them what I mean by the drop down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So normally when you come to your recruiting dashboard, you land, let's see, normally you land here. This is where you land normally. You click on recruiting, and this would open up the recruiting dashboard for you. Yeah. And this shows you, okay, for me it shows all the requisitions, but it would show basically based on what you selected before. So it shows I own, and this is what I own. It's a test instance, so I do own something. But if I go and I say I collaborate on, I'll see the requisitions that I actually collaborate on, and for which I am not the owner. Now this might happen because for most of you that you might not own these requisitions, but you might collaborate on. But if you are hiring managers, supervisors, you have direct reports, you would be an owner as well. So some requisitions would be available under the I own tab as well. So all the requisitions that I see here is I'm collaborating on. There is no requisition that is open that I collaborate on. So this is one thing. Mm-hmm. Now, one more thing which is interesting and which you might want to know. All the staff requisitions when they come into Taleo the first time from e-business suite, which is the screen that we saw before, we call it position management or staff job description. When they come into the pending stage. They come into pending because they are already pending on MTHR to review. As a next step, MTHR basically reaches out to the respective hiring managers. It identifies what are the pre-qualification criteria that you would want to have. Sam also mentioned ACE candidates. So the ACE requirement is also at that point is when you identify. So you identify these are my 7 requirements. I need expertise of a person in these 7 fields, plus I need somebody who's experienced in nuclear engineering as an example. And you say nuclear engineering experience for 10 years is required, and then these 7 are assets. And this is where you say, so under ACE you identify the requirements and you will say out of the 7 assets, anybody who has at least 4 assets is an ACE candidate. This is what is determined by the recruiter. Once this is done, so we'll consider a requisition here.
But just so you know, we're going to be doing courses for more advanced Taleo users later on, so this might be something, if you're using it on a regular basis, that you'd like to sign up. Again, today we don't want to go into too much detail because it could be a bit too much information for you all.
Yep. So this is the requisition that has come. Once approved, it will show on the open. Right now it is pending. We'll quickly, I will show you how it looks, and then we'll approve it. So Okay, because I'm connected to the printer, I can't see it properly here. But this is where I can see everything. Otherwise, you see the tabs here. Now, if you don't see the tabs, you see tabs like this. The important thing would be to check what is your zoom level. If your zoom level is 100, you see the screen exactly as it should look like. Yeah. So in this case, I have all the fields here. There is one more thing that I can do. I can basically collapse and I go to the owners field and I can see who are the owners. So in this case, this is a ERP training officer. This is Sam's current position, and these are the people who are the owners. Now it is a test instance. Nothing is like, it might not be the right representation of the data, but this is how you see. As you see, the recruiter is by default identifies as recruitment MTHR. When it comes to recruitment MTHR, the recruitment team basically they do a scrum kind of a thing where they identify who needs to take what. They take up a requisition, and you'll start seeing the name of an individual here. And this individual is the one who will be basically reaching out to you, asking your pre-qualification criteria and everything. The pre-qualification criteria which we are talking about is basically added here under pre-screening, and mostly we are handling it through questions. There are some questions that show up automatically, but there are some that need to be added. The recruiters would add the questions, so I won't go in detail, and they'll reach to you and they'll ask you what is required, what is an asset, and based on that they can set a filter which is called alerts. This is where you set your ACE alert, and you can say that all the requirements plus once you have set some assets, you can say 5 assets out of 9 as an example. Here we don't have any question attached, so 0 out of 0, something like that. Once this is done, they'll basically do more actions, and they'll if they have already coordinated a lot with you. Yeah.
So again, this is just
Can I just say that this is only an aid for the managers to identify the top candidates. There is no one eliminated from the competition. Everybody remains there all the way through, right to the bitter end. Okay, so this is not an elimination process.
Yeah. So if something like this happens, basically they'll go and they'll say agreement reached or something, and I'll just basically I'm approving it in an administrator way. So now the requisition is basically approved. Did I approve it? No. So once your requisition is approved, it is ready to be posted, and in this regard basically the recruiters can come, and based on what has been agreed, if it is full competitive, if it is not full competitive, if it is a mobility position, they have a choice to basically post it only on the internal career section if it's mobility. If it is something that is fully competitive, it is to be posted everywhere, they can post it everywhere. Yeah, this is something recruiters would do, so maybe I should skip it. Yeah. So this is a requisition. When people start applying to a requisition, right, how do you see it? So I'll do something like this. When multiple people apply to a requisition, you see something like this, a number against them. Now this is a test instance as of 1st January, so nothing of this is real data, which is a good thing. That's why we do our training here. So we don't have to worry about anything. We have one requisition here where we had 1,000 candidates, okay, but we can't see it. As an example, this would be something. So this would mean that 9 candidates actually went in and applied to it. While we are here, I'll basically would switch screens and I'll go to this instance.
Again, most of the other screens that you saw before, you would not be seeing. This is something done between hiring managers and recruitment, where you're identifying questions before in order to get these ACE candidates. And now you've posted the requisition and people start applying to it. And you as collaborators could get involved in that by seeing and doing some evaluation on those candidates. And Mukul will show you how to go in and see who's applied.
So this is how I'm searching for a requisition, and this is a test requisition which we'll see, and we'll do the evaluation here. So basically it's a test requisition. We have 3 candidates who have applied for the vacancy. The vacancy is posted. Anybody who applies would basically show here. I'll go to HM screen again because we have moved a candidate already ahead. Let's say I pick IAEA candidate 2 and I move him forward. Like Sam told you, you can move a candidate forward by clicking on the green arrows, and this would be something a collaborator would do. You would basically move a candidate forward once you have considered the candidate's credentials. You can say, okay, I want to move the candidate to SL submission. SL stands for shortlist, and you can say, good experience in, I don't know.
And while he's typing, just again to show you, remember that steps that I was showing you, the stages and steps? This is what we're doing now. We're moving forward candidates that we want to recommend for selection, or we're rejecting candidates, and then HR is endorsing candidates as well at this stage.
Yeah. So we have told the comments, and we say save and close. This is something the collaborators actually do, as I've understood going forward. You normally form part of the panel and you help in shortlisting the candidates. Once the candidates are shortlisted, again it is an administrator or the hiring manager who will do that. They'll move the shortlist, assuming both the candidates were shortlisted. So in this case, we'll shortlist Ashwin as well. God. He got the job, yeah. So we go here, we select the 2 candidates, and this is something that the AAs would do, like I was telling you. They'll move it to HR screening. Now your shortlist, if as an example 220 candidates have applied, typically I think it is 10% to 15% that are shortlisted, and this is where you'll move them forward. You move them forward, and this basically goes into the HR screening part, where they review your shortlist. They see if somebody has been left out who is a good candidate, or if everybody is basically deserving to be taken forward. Now out of the 2 candidates, so we have only 3 on the requisition. Let's say of the 2, we are basically interviewing both of them. First, let's say if you want to do a Sonru. Sonru basically would happen in assessments. The candidates who are moved to assessments, this is where a Sonru interview can happen, and this is where you can further shortlist the people who have actually passed the assessments. You take them forward to interviews, which is the next step. The person who does well in the interview, or if it is a vacancy with multiple positions, would be moved forward to propose offer, as an example. So in this case, it is HR screening. Let's say the HR has endorsed a shortlist, and I would skip assessments also here because
of
we
time,
have 15 minutes. So I'll basically take both of them to interviews, and I'll show you evaluations, which is something that you might have to do. So I'll do something like this, and I would take directly to interviews. Now, once this has happened, the candidates have basically moved where the interviews need to be scheduled. Again, your admin assistants, they coordinate the scheduling of the interview. The interviews have been scheduled. People have participated. Now there are choices. You can record the occurrence of the interview in the system. This is something you can do. Or you can keep the interviews outside and you record just the evaluation. I won't cover the creation of the interview and everything because that would be more technical, more AA specific, and I think Sam would cover it going forward. I would quickly show you how an evaluation can be done once the interview has happened. So I'll move the candidates forward. The interview has been done. Under HM recommendation summary is where you do the evaluations. To do evaluations, you click on the name of a candidate. You go to interviews and evaluation. And you'll see that there are some evaluations already attached. I'll quickly cover what is a candidate summary evaluation. A candidate summary evaluation is complete. It's just about the candidate, how good the candidate has done with regards to the vacancy that was posted. The process summary evaluation covers the whole process. We generate an appointment proposal report out of the evaluations that are done and all the candidates that have applied. And it is important that the proposal summary is attached to the candidate who would be one of your proposed candidate. So proposal summary, the process summary is done once. The candidate summary evaluation is done for all the candidates. We go here and we say complete. This is one way, or we can send it to some of the participants. Now, assuming you are a collaborator and the admin assistant wants to record your view that can you prepare the evaluation, you can be added as a participant. Everybody who is in the agency would basically show up here.
And this was I was showing you. You might get an email saying, "Dear Sam, can you kindly evaluate this candidate for us? Thank you." That's how you would add that person.
There is a possibility to send an email alone, and this is done here. Okay. So I can say, it doesn't show completely, I think, because of the projector, but let's see if it shows now. Okay. Yeah, and I can directly give the email here. So I'm in the internal participant list. Or I'll just select
Again,
anyone.
let's not confuse them too much because they might get...
Don't
worry, it looks confusing, and I know, but it's a process. And again, when we go into detail of Taleo,
yeah, I would have to unplug it. Maybe I can show the full
Yeah.
screen. Let's see. Yeah, no, doesn't help. No, it doesn't help.
Okay, let's then just show
So
them.
I'm just selecting someone and we'll basically say, okay, done. So I've added some participants. The people that we add show up here. And now what you can do is you can select an evaluation and you can say send the evaluation request. Initially, if you saw the send request tab was not available. Or if you want to do the, if you are a collaborator, you can always come to this screen yourself and you can do the evaluation here also. To be able to do the evaluation, you just click on complete and this would open the form for you, where you fill in the information. This was one of the screenshots that Sam showed you all. So this is basically on the candidate's performance in the interview. You identify how the candidate is doing, you identify the overall evaluation, and then you say that if the candidate is well qualified or not qualified. Yeah. The other way is to send the request, and this you can do by selecting, saying send request.
And then you get the email like
And you identify one of the two participants that you added below, you add one of the candidates.
And this is especially useful when you have a panel, an interview panel, and you're not necessarily working in that area. You know, we're always getting external participants from different divisions to join in. This is where we would send that evaluation to an external participant.
Yeah. And you say send. So the evaluation was sent to this person. Now I can check here.
It's not showing on the screen though. For some reason.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I'm not showing as well.
Okay.
So I'm checking if I get the email. Let's see how.
Just while he's checking, so again, just to repeat, for every candidate, you're doing an evaluation, and for the evaluation summary of the whole process. You're attaching that to the candidate that you're proposing for selection. And that's how the offer goes. It's a different way of thinking now. The offer is a mechanism for approval right now that goes to the panel.
So the email is taking time. So we'll fill it here.
Yeah, because of time, I guess let's just show them how once we send it to HR for the offer, and that's where they stop actually.
This is where you stop basically.
That's just pretty much it.
This is where you stop. So you
So
fill
you've
in
done
the
your
evaluation
evaluations.
and you stop.
Exactly, and you've submitted it with your recommendation, and this is where it goes. And again, this might look like a lot of buttons and confusing, but once you do it a few times, it'll be straightforward. Now, just to let you know what we did, and if on your way out, we made you a Taleo basics, basically. They're really basic things, because if you don't use this on a regular basis, you're like, oh, I forgot what Mukul was saying. How do I do that? This will show you how to get into Taleo, number one, which is very important. It shows you how do you search for a candidate in a pool of all these pools we were talking about, whether it's consultants or the rosters and so on. How you link a candidate to a requisition. So if you're hiring a consultant, how do you link that consultant to the requisition? And then at the back, many people ask for this. How do you print PHF? Some people still prefer the hard copy. So please take a copy of this on your way out. This is really useful. It's like a cheat sheet that I even still use right now. And again, if you're really interested in more detail, then me and Mukul will be doing this in the future. We'll go into real detail of how moving forward candidate, how do you define questions properly in order to find who those ACE candidates are. As Naomi's saying, the system does not disqualify anyone, okay? It just flags us, depending on what we ask it, it flags us who the best candidates are and who are not. So, again, we didn't want to confuse you too much. If there are any questions still open, please, now would be the time. I think we confused them, Mukul.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, then, I'm sorry for confusing you all. I told you you're in the wrong briefing. No. Thank you very, very much for coming. And if you have any questions, you can always email me or email. You have a question, please? You sure? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Naomi, for coming today. And thank you, Mukul.
Thanks.
Thank you.